Hello, listeners. This is Kat, and welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfics. This will be the continuation of State of Mind. This will be part 42, the second half to chapter 25. The man exited the airport, taking a deep breath of the cool Japan air. He hadn't been in the country in some time, busy leading a group of select few in America. He'd grown tired of them, though, and there was something more interesting waiting in Musutafu for him. After that online video had circulated, he'd watched it several times over, very interested in the boy with the familiar, curly green hair, taking down the villain many times his own size, using a strange conglomeration of abilities. Hisashi certainly wondered when and where his son had gotten these abilities, curious as to what he thought he was doing trying to be a hero, of all things. He'd follow in his good old dad's footsteps. He was sure of it. He just needed a gentle push. Hisashi's face transformed into a twisted facade of a grin as he hailed a cab to head deeper into the familiar city of Musutafu to gather his old gang. Class continued on as normal, and Izuku's surname was changed without a fuss. He and his mom started routine correspondence with each other, mostly just texting but with the occasional call to discuss the progression of her wedding planning. Izuku would be going to meet her fiancé the next weekend with Shoto, who had agreed to come, though Izuku could tell he was nervous about it. But it was okay. So was he. They could be nervous together. By the time Saturday drew back around, Izuku and Shoto found themselves side by side in the back seat of the car with Mike, who was driving them to their double date. Izuku was dressed as obnoxiously bright as possible, his long hair braided and laced with many vivid neon ribbons, pins designed with cat heads holding the hair on the other side of his head against his skull. He wore the long-sleeved astronaut shirt Shoto had gotten him, and his bright yellow scarf, as well as brighter blue galaxy print leggings and hot pink shorts over them. He also wore his usual black gloves that only covered his thumbs and left index finger. Shoto was a bit more properly dressed for the occasion in a black turtleneck sweater and dark denim jeans. His hair was brushed and perfectly parted down the middle. He looked beautiful, and Izuku had told him so before they left, almost causing him to catch on fire again. They pulled up to the restaurant, Mike letting them know that he'd be near, running some errands for his radio station if they needed anything, and to let him know when they were ready to head back to the dorms. And then, with that, they headed inside. "Thank you for coming, Peppermint," Izuku said, as he opened the door for them. "You're welcome," Shoto answered, glancing around the restaurant curiously. He'd never been to a place like this before. It was only slightly formal, and was supposed to serve a little of everything from American cuisine to French, while still holding true to regular Japanese food. Izuku caught sight of his mom, an unfamiliar man next to her, off to the side, and tugged Shoto's arm in their direction, ignoring the more than a couple strange looks they received at Izuku's different idea of formal wear. "I'm glad you two made it." Inko smiled as they all sat down, she and the man with her having stood when they approached. "You both look very handsome." She looked toward Shoto. "My name is Inko, by the way. It's great to meet you." "Todoroki Shoto," Shoto answered in his usual, almost flat tone of voice. Izuku watched his mom's eyes widen as she realized exactly who Izuku was with, and Izuku narrowed his eyes, prepared to launch himself to Shoto's defense if she even mentioned that flaming bastard. She didn't, though, and Izuku relaxed. "This is my fiancé, Ito Yuki." Inko nodded to the man at her side, and he bowed his head in greeting. This meant that Inko's name was going to be Ito Inko. It had a nice ring to it, Izuku thought. "It is very nice to meet you both," the man said, in a voice that was as smooth as silk. The man was tall, even sitting down, almost as tall as Toshi, and he had long, straight red hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. He had thin, angular red eyes that were full of honesty and kindness. He wore blue jeans and a plain black shirt with a formal sport coat over it, the sleeves slightly rolled up. He wore thin, gold wire-framed glasses that gave him the appearance of a scholar. And his aura was a calm, clean mix of light blue and green, which Izuku had come to recognize as calmness and friendliness. All in all, he seemed exactly the opposite of Hisashi. "I'm Yamazawa Izuku." Izuku nodded his head back, and Ito offered him a gentle smile in return, shaking his hand over the table. He caught Inko giving a small smile at the mention of his new surname, and he exhaled evenly, a strange feeling spreading through him. They picked up their menus then, and Izuku predictably ordered katsudon, Shoto ordering cold soba, neither of them really interested in their numerous options and preferring to stick with what they knew they liked. "So, how are you two doing?" Inko asked, making small talk after they had put in their orders. "Fine," Izuku answered, his voice stilted. Now that they were actually here and settled, he was feeling uncomfortable. It had been a long, long time since he'd had an actual sit-down meal with his mother. He couldn't remember if he'd actually had a meal with her since that fateful day when he was 10. It was kind of unsettling, and he didn't know how to act. Honestly, he barely even knew his mother. He didn't know what to say or do around her, or her new fiancé. He startled when Shoto grabbed one of his hands beneath the table, squeezing it and offering him a reassuring look. He hadn't realized that he'd been picking at his nails. Izuku took a deep breath, centering himself before trying to make his answer to his mom's question a little less abrasive. "We're doing well. Just classes and normal stuff." He shrugged. "You both go to UA, right?" Ito looked between the two of them, eyes sparking with interest behind his glasses. "Yeah," Izuku answered. "We're first years." "I graduated from UA," Ito responded, one hand picking at a napkin on the table. "As a support course student, though, not hero course. That's what I do, though. I make gear for heroes at a smaller development company." Izuku leaned forward, eyes sparking with interest. "Really?" Shoto relaxed in his seat, releasing Izuku's hand as the two began talking about hero costumes enthusiastically. It was going to be okay now. Diagonally from Shoto, Izuku's mom directed a happy smile toward him, and he offered a small one back in return. She seemed happy that everyone was getting along. Their food arrived soon after that, and they ate, Izuku and Ito still going on, now discussing the most useful types of material for costumes that best enhance specific types of quirks, both Inko and Shoto listening to their boys in fond silence. They eventually parted ways, Ito giving Izuku a card for Hatsume, which he was kind of nervous about since he'd been putting off the inevitable conversation with her since he had technically kinda used her bomb to blow his own mind up. Izuku called Mike to come pick them back up, and they both climbed into the back seat, Izuku dropping into the leather and sighing in relief. "That wasn't too bad," he murmured, leaning his head against Shoto's shoulder. "I feel exhausted now, though. Too much socializing for me." Shoto nodded in complete understanding. He shared the same feeling and was ready to get back to the safe space of the dorm. "Your mom seemed happy," Shoto murmured as Izuku stifled a yawn behind his hand. "Mm-hmm. Yeah, she did. It's good. I'm glad she found someone she can be happy with," Izuku murmured. Shoto tapped at the back of Izuku's hand, and Izuku looked up at him with a raised brow. "You did too, you know." Up front, Mike squealed in a high-pitched tone of voice, grinning madly, and Izuku blushed, wishing his hair was down so that he could hide behind it. "Thank you," he whispered, and Shoto nodded. Once they were back at the dorms, Izuku collapsed on one of the couches in the common room, Wink sprinting in from the teacher's hallway, with Eri close behind, both of them tackling him. He gasped when their full weight landed on his chest, Shoto chuckling from where he'd still been walking in, next to Mike. Izuku sat up, smiling. "Your hair looks nice, Eri," he said, patting the top of her head, avoiding the sensitive protrusion of her horn. "Thank you," she said, jumping off of Izuku's lap to rush over to Shoto. "Please, Todo?" Shoto sighed, patting Eri's head as well. He knew she was referring to the fact that she wanted him to sing and dance to Let It Go for her. He gave the same answer that he always did. "Maybe next time." Eri sighed but nodded, asking him instead to braid her hair like her big brother's, which he was happy to do, coming to sit next to Izuku, Eri crouching on the ground in front of him so that Shoto could work on her braid. The next day, Izuku finally went to see Hatsume, the card in his pocket and his fingers ringing together nervously. He'd put it off for far too long now, and it was only going to make it even worse when he finally told her what he had done. The inventor was in the support rooms, as Izuku had known she would be. They could sometimes feel her experiments exploding all the way in the dorms at strange times throughout the night. Izuku approached the door and, without knocking, shoved it open. It was about noon, and the light from the obviously new windows filtered brightly to show the pink-haired girl standing at a workbench, a heavy, industrial mask covering her face as she held a blowtorch against what looked like a statuette of a cow. Izuku didn't ask, instead announcing himself by clearing his throat. Hatsume whirled around, blowtorch flaring, pink dreadlocks flying, and her eyes widening behind the narrow slit in the mask. 10 million! She exclaimed, switching the torch off and shoving her mask up as she walked forward, an excited expression on her face. Izuku was startled. He'd almost forgotten about that nickname of hers. The sports festival felt like so long ago now. So much has happened since then. The fight with Stain, Muscular, Kamino, Overhaul. She grabbed Izuku's shoulders and pulled him farther into the room. "I'm so glad you're here. It's been so long. I've had ideas to integrate into your costume. Some of the other Hero Course students as well, if you'd send Shinso and Shoji this way next time you see them. But for yours, I was thinking we could strengthen the boots that you wear, and also, I know that you like those gloves with the medicine in them, but that they tend to disintegrate when you use your quirk at higher percentages. So I was working on a stronger material for the fabrics of the gloves, as well as toughening the lining of the inside of the costume. I was also thinking we could adjust the layout of where the medicine is kept, or how it is stored to create more room on your forearms to distribute the pressure your quirk causes. I just need a bit of input about your quirk so that I can get started on some of my designs. Oh, and if you could give me that bomb back, that'd be great too, before Majima-sensei comes back from his meeting with Nezu." Izuku, who had been listening intently, flinched when she mentioned her bomb, one hand coming up to scratch the back of his neck nervously. About the bomb." Hatsume went absolutely quiet, turning her full attention to Izuku, suddenly becoming serious. "I saw the video," she said, and Izuku's lips formed a thin line. "I don't completely understand how your quirk works, even less so now. What did you do?" Izuku swallowed thickly. Well, a lot of it I can't legally talk about, but Hatsume shook her head, slapping his arm, a wry grin on her face. "Spit it out, 10 million. Izuku sighed, shoulders dropping. "I detonated it. In my head." There was silence, Hatsume staring at Izuku as if she was suddenly realizing how absolutely stupid he was. "Why?" She heaved a breath, eyes shooting up to stare at the underside of the industrial mask that hung over her head from where she'd pushed it up. Izuku tapped his fingers together. I had to. Her eyes shot back to Izuku, brows lowered. Izuku couldn't read her expression. No, you really didn't. Izuku's mouth went dry at her stiff tone. Maybe not, he sighed. But I did it. It happened, and it's over. I'm sorry your bomb is gone, but I'm not sorry for what I did. Hatsume frowned, exhaling deeply. Midori... Izuku shook his head quickly. No, it's Yamazawa now. But you can call me Izuku anyway. The corner of her mouth twitched. You can call me Mei then. But Izuku, that bomb wasn't just a normal bomb. I shouldn't have asked you to hide it. What do you mean it wasn't normal? He frowned. Mei sighed heavily, the crosses in her eyes turning away from Izuku. There was a reason Majima-sensei didn't want me to have it more than normal. I deal with explosives every day, but this was different. You see, most bombs consist of TNT, RDX, ammonium nitrate, or other high explosives in combination with each other. But I wanted to try something different. I was thinking about Bakugo's quirk and ways to enhance it. And I found an online site that sells azide. Izuku felt like he was missing something. He had no idea what that was. Mei seemed to sense his confusion because she sighed again and moved to sit down on a rotating stool by a different workbench, pulling her mask off to set to the side, shoving the blowtorch onto the counter. Azide is the most explosive substance ever created by humans, she explained seriously. It's highly reactive and highly explosive. I thought it would be safe in your mindscape. I didn't realize... Her head lifted, and she seemed to be glaring at Izuku, something flashing in her eyes. You shouldn't be alive, Izuku. That's why you were in a coma, wasn't it? I almost killed you. They didn't know if you would wake up. Class 1A was so screwed up, the entire school could see it, and it's my fault. No. Izuku shook his head, stepping closer out of concern. It's not your fault. It's okay. Everything is okay now. I'm fine. I'm better than ever, actually. Everything worked out in the end. Mei sighed heavily, before standing up from her stool and leveling a finger at Izuku. You better never do something like that again, and I am never giving you something for your mindscape again. I had so many ideas for storage for your costume with your mindscape. I had blueprints, but nope, not now. Say bye-bye to my babies, Izuku. Mei, Izuku whined, a small smile forming on his face. Don't you dare! She glared at Izuku, but she was smiling again, eyes brightening. But you're so awesome, Mei, he said. Your ideas are so great. I won't do anything like that again, I promise. Mei searched Izuku's eyes for a second, before excitement took hold of her, and she turned on her heel, grinning. Come look at my blueprints. I had an idea for a paralytic you could store in your mindscape and just whip out in a close combat fight. Just jab them with it and down they go. Izuku smiled, following the girl, glad that she was back to normal. Things continued to be great after that. He was healing his relationship with his mom. He had an amazing boyfriend, a wonderful sister, great friends, a brilliant mentor, and fantastic guardians. Izuku was truly, really happy for the first time in his life. He was enjoying every second of his life. He still had nightmares occasionally, but they weren't as bad, and most of the time he was okay dealing with them on his own. But any time he couldn't, Shoto was always there quickly, with no complaint to take care of him. Izuku was so lucky, so happy. But there was something inside of him, something in the back of his mind that was telling him that none of it was going to last. Some voice whispering to him to not enjoy it too much because then it would just hurt worse when it was eventually taken away. So that's why Izuku was unsurprised when it all fell violently apart, like a Ferris wheel crumbling to pieces mid-ride. Chaos and destruction. It was a few days later when Izuku received the call. He was in his room with Shoto and Wink, the two of them working on homework together while Wink did her best to distract them by walking across their notes as they struggled with geometry problems. He was just finishing a particularly difficult problem when his phone rang. He glanced over with a frown, setting his pencil down when he saw it was his mom, immediately wondering why she would call without texting him first. He picked up his phone and slid his thumb across the screen, answering the call and holding the speaker to his ear. "Mom?" he asked, Shoto glancing up at him in confusion. He knew of Izuku's phone call anxiety and that he always made sure people texted him first before a call so that he had time to prepare himself. His mom did too. So far, she had always texted first. "Mom?" Izuku repeated in confusion when no one spoke right away. "Hey, son. Been a while." Izuku's world fell away, all the breath leaving his lungs, fear shooting through his body like hot electricity as his eyes slowly widened in horror. Shoto was immediately on edge, watching him carefully, taking the hand that had clenched against the ground into his own. There was a deep chuckle on the other end, and the hand holding the phone to his head trembled. "Not going to answer me? Well, that's fine. I'm going to text you a location, and I want you to be there tomorrow, at 1700, alone, if you ever want to see your mother alive again. I'm excited to see you again, Izuku." There was a click as the line went dead, and the phone slid from Izuku's hand to clatter against the floor. His hand moving to clasp over his mouth in terror, panic tearing through him like a tsunami. He still wasn't breathing. "Izuku, who was it? What happened?" Shoto leaned closer, hands closing around his arms, trying to get him to look at him, but Izuku's eyes were wide and hazy, unfocused, staring straight through Shoto. "Izuku, please. I don't know what's wrong. You need to breathe." Izuku inhaled sharply, quickly, and then did it again, tugging his hand away from Shoto so that he could wrap his arms around himself. A high-pitched moan leaving his chest as he began hyperventilating, lightning bursting into existence across his skin as he bent forward, gasping. That was not what Shoto meant when he told him to breathe. "I'm getting Aizawa-sensei," Shoto suddenly said, and took off out of the room, rushing down the empty hallways and pounding his fist against the Yamada Aizawa door. Aizawa threw it open almost immediately, eyes frazzled, his capture weapon clutched loosely in one hand. "It's Izuku," Shoto gasped out. Aizawa was already moving, pulling his door closed and taking off down the hallway. "Quickly, what happened?" his teacher demanded. "He received a call. I think it was his mom. But when he answered, he immediately got scared and now he's panicking," Shoto explained, keeping up with Aizawa as they reached Izuku's room, shoving the door open. They found Izuku backed up against the wall, hands in his hair, chest heaving, eyes clenched shut, and his feet kicking at the ground helplessly as his body flickered with One for All until Shota canceled it. Shota rushed into the room and dropped to the ground in front of his kid, reaching out to grab him, but freezing when Izuku yelped as soon as he felt fingers skim his shoulder. "Izuku, it's me," Shota reassured. "Open your eyes. It's all right. You're safe." Izuku groaned, dropping his hands from his hair to claw at his arms. Shota grimaced, trying to stop him, noticing belatedly that the kid was targeting the burns on his arm specifically. "Kid." Shota grabbed Izuku's wrists, the boy's eyes flashing open. Izuku's voice was barely audible, a breathless moan as Shota pressed one of his hands against his own chest, like always. "Everything is fine. Just work on breathing with me." Shota said gently. Izuku shook his head rapidly, hair flying about his face. He choked out, breath catching as he groaned, bending forward, ripping his arm from Shota's grip, and whirling around, lurching for the small trash can by his nook, and shoving his face into it, vomiting violently, his back heaving. Shoto, who had been hanging back for a moment, dropped to his knees, rubbing Izuku's back and holding his hair away from his face. Eventually, Izuku dropped to the side, wiping his mouth with the back of a quaking hand, tears leaking from his eyes as he worked to get his breathing under control. He gasped out and then pressed his hands into his eyes, shuddering. "Sign it." Shota pushed his way forward, next to Shoto, sensing that there was something important that the kid had to say but couldn't get it out. "Sign the words." He knew Izuku knew enough signs to form simple thoughts. Izuku dropped his right hand from his face and pointed his middle finger in place of the missing index finger shakily at his phone, then signed a small, simple word, but one that carried so much weight behind it. "Father." Shota immediately grabbed the kid's phone, unlocking it easily and going to his call history, finding that he'd gotten a call less than 10 minutes ago from his mom. He then saw the message notification in the top bar, also from his mother. It was only a location. Shota put 2 and 2 together and pulled his own phone from his pocket, stepping away to call Tsukauchi, leaving Izuku to Shoto for the moment. Meanwhile, Shoto had pulled Izuku against him, holding his shaking body while he worked to get himself under control. Wink rubbing against him. He took my mom, Shoto." Izuku gasped out. Shoto's grip tightened. "We'll figure it out together," he promised. "It'll be okay. It'll be okay." All right, listeners, this concludes Chapter 25 of State of Mind. Chapter 26 will be up next. Just a few more chapters to go until we're at the end of this fic. When I was first reading this, I got to this point in the fic, and the first half of this chapter was so happy for me that I was like, wow, this is great. We're finally towards the end. Izuku's finally getting those happy moments. And as Izuku, right, was getting to that point of, why am I happy right now? There's still more things to come, aren't there? I felt the same way while reading it. I think the author does a really nice job kind of conveying some of those thoughts that Izuku has, right? Of, should I sit and enjoy this happiness? The more I enjoy it, the worse it's going to be when it's ripped away again. Because he's coming from a history of trauma, so naturally his thoughts are going to go there. But I think it's great, right? We're seeing some of the development with Inko and Izuku and Shoto's relationship with Izuku. Of course, him and Mei reconnecting as well. So a lot of really great things that take place throughout the chapter. And of course, Izuku's biological father has to come back in and ruin things. So drop the comments below on what you're thinking about everything so far. And as always, thank you all so much for listening.